Hey guys, latest interview from Girona, Spain, the Brownstone Institute conference last week. And we have Xavier Azalbert. Don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but he goes through the whole situation in Europe and what's going on at the moment and who's driving what and what we need to do. And he's the editor of Francois. And you can go there and see all the latest news and what's happening in France and the whole of Europe. And it's a great conversation. He is super smart. Second time I've met him in person. You're going to enjoy. Just before we go ahead, quick heads up. In Ireland on Saturday the 12th, this coming Saturday, we've got a fantastic day-long event. And it's in Wexford, Enniscorthy. And myself and Werner Wheelock and other guests will go through health and weight loss and nutrition, all the latest science, what you need to know. So RFK Jr. and Maha are all going on. I don't know what they're going to deliver first, to be honest, but we can go ahead ourselves and get things right. So kickstart your weight loss, longevity and health journey. Saturday in Enniscorthy, full 3-course lunch is included. So anyone in the region in Ireland can come along. And of course, I'll probably get asked a lot of questions beyond health and nutrition, like geopolitics and everything else going on in the world. That's okay. We're going to be there 6 or 7 hours and have a big lunch as well. And it's going to be great fun. So hopefully you can come along. So here we go, Xavier. Hey guys, I'm here in the Brownstone Institute conference in Girona, Spain. And I've met up again with Xavier Azalbert, who is an expert on kind of loads of stuff. But Xavier, great to see you again. And could we talk about the corruption and the problem with Europe?
Ivor, and hello to my Irish friends. Thanks a lot for having me again on your program. I mean, of course, when you talk about Europe, there's many things that one could talk about, and it's really hard to actually know which one to start with. But let me tell you a few things, because I run a paper. And then what's important is not really what I think are the problems, but it's what the readers think are the problems. And that's basically what I'm going to talk to you about. And if you ask 1,000 people in a representative sample whether they have an issue with global warming or social distancing or so on and so forth, most likely they'll tell you yes. Now, if you ask them whether they have an issue with peace, they'll tell you yes. Whether they have issue with war, they'll tell you yes. So they'll say yes to everything. And the biggest issue that we have right now is to identify in the order of magnitude what is the most important for ourselves. And that's what I've tried to do with those surveys. The first thing that I've done with respect to French people is I've asked them, do you trust the politicians that actually are dealing with you? 65% of people believe there are no French politicians who are incarnating a positive outcome for France for the future. I believe that may be the same in Ireland, that may be the same in other countries. So the question of trust is fundamental, because if you cannot trust, if you cannot identify an individual who is in a political role right now to, first of all, act in your interest, if you cannot find another person, then it's going to be very difficult to get public opinion on your side, because trust is the foundation. So to cut a long story short and to answer your question, I believe the most important issue in Europe right now is trust. The second issue is those politicians who claim they are acting in your interest, but who do not have the legitimacy, they do not have the follow-up of the people. How can they claim they're acting in our interest if there's no trust? Now, if you look at what they're doing, with Ursula von der Leyen, she wants to rearm Europe. When Trump, Putin, everybody wants peace. So they are demonstratively acting against our interest. And therefore what it does is it convey an additional distrust in these people, and it conveys an additional distancing between the politicians who are in power and the people who are putting those politicians in power. And that, for me, is the most fundamental issue. We can go into more details about purchasing power, immigration, about a lot of, as I say, global warming, whether it's important. Of course, purchasing power is the most important element, because if you don't trust a politician to act in your interest, what are they supposed to do in the first instance? It's to protect you from the risk attached to economic risk, which is, of course, immigration, but it's also to ensure that you can have food in your plate, that you can heat up your house, but you can protect your families. That should be the fundamental role of any form of republic. And if those politicians are not acting in your interest and you're not trusting them, then demonstratively they are acting in their interest. And that is the difference. And that's what we've observed in France.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, Xavier, immigration is a topical one. Ireland is, I believe, just looking at the trajectory of the last few years, where it's heading. If it continues, our politicians clearly, demonstrably are not in our interest. No question. And I guess they report up to the WF, EU, von der Leyen, whoever. It's a disaster to Irish culture and history, to our whole people. So maybe we'll talk a bit about the mass migration, because you're absolutely right. It's also hemorrhaging vast sums of money from the tax coffers in Ireland. So it's not just a cultural kind of almost genocidal type smell to it, but it's also draining our resources and indebting us. And we know with Sweden and with Germany and France, we've all been screwed with this one. And now it's beginning to be apparent that we really have got screwed with this one.
Well, I mean, the situation of Ireland is one situation, but let's talk about Europe. First of all, Europe is a group of countries that don't really have a boundary. And the way Europe was created, I mean, if you look at the European Treaty, it basically states it's a space of freedom and right. A space of freedom and right. Well, let me tell you, in the Constitution, whether it's Irish or French or anything like this, Ireland is defined as a country. This country has got borders. It has a space. It has a naval space, maritime space, airspace, earth space. Europe has no space defined. There's no boundaries. So therefore, it's a concept. It's something which is almost virtual. So if you suddenly take people into a virtual world, then you will end up by having virtual insanity. And this is what we have right now. And Jamiroquai sang Virtual Insanity, but we are in a world where we have transposed the problem away from homeland with a series of borders. And I'm not against immigration. I'm talking about here geodemographics and the way we've actually built the level of complexity. So we have now Europe, this space of rights and liberties. Now, rights for who? Liberties for whom? And if you look at what's happening within Europe, the way they're deciding, the way they're making decisions, the way they're deciding for the vaccines, for example, the way they're deciding for the army, it's a unilateral decision against the interest of the people. So, in the name of my freedom, in the name of my rights, they are trying to make those decisions which are in essence against my own interest. And that is a fundamental issue. Now, when we look at immigration, it becomes a problem because we do not know whose rights we're defending. We do not know whose liberties we're defending. And when you have a space where you have ill-defined rights, ill-defined freedoms, by definition you have confusion. And that's why it's very hard for people to know whether immigration is a good thing or a bad thing. Whether having an army for Europe or defending Ukraine is a good thing or a bad thing. So they're just following the leaders and the media who are claiming it's a good thing. So we have to fight for Ukraine. They don't think for themselves. Is Ukraine within Europe? No, it's not. Is it within our space of right and liberties? No, it's not. So we are displacing the problems, and politicians are well known to show you the fingers in order to prevent you from showing the moon. In essence, they are taking the problems away, the real problem, true problems, they're displacing the problems, and eventually we are left with issues such as immigration to think about. But in my view, it's not the most fundamental issue. Fundamental is trust. If we had trustworthy politicians, What they would do is they would start by looking at the community, and then they would interact between each other's communities, between Irish and French, like we had in the 1950s. We had trade exchange. Everybody was working fine. We were happy. Okay? And the final element is we very often confuse immigration with integration. Because the issue is, we all know you have culture. We in France, we have a culture. Your culture, and I lived in Dublin for a while, so I know the Irish culture, not as much as you do. But my first thing as a French person is when I come to Ireland is to respect your culture. Respect. So trust and respect. If you don't trust a politician, you don't respect them. You do not have a social contract.
Absolutely, Xavier. And in fact, in the Irish thing, there's the zero respect extends to our politicians, and school boards are now removing all of the parts of the syllabus relating to Irish history and culture. So, like, it's so insane. Not only are they flooding with people that are problematic in high volume, so they're doing high volume and people that's going to be impossible to integrate, but they're also dismantling actively our culture and history. So given that, and it's palpable and in our face now, the topic of what's driving them, I don't personally believe that the Irish politicians are so venal and sociopathic that they are just personally driven to destroy our history and culture and ruin our country. I don't believe that, actually. They are reporting to the EU Commission that's unelected, but these oligarchies way up, like the Commission and von der Leyen, who are they ultimately reporting to? Who's driving their zeal? Or at that level, are they really self-driving all of this lunacy, do you think?
Okay, there's two parts to the question. The first part is basically what's happening with respect to the Irish culture, and the word I would use here is called dilution. What we're trying to do is we're trying to dilute your culture, the core values of your culture, with people who are not being trained or not being integrated fast enough in order to assimilate this. And it's exactly like if you're taking a kid and you're trying to actually teaching seventh grade sort of things when he's in third grade, he won't be able to assimilate, and then you have a failure. So in essence, in terms of education and integration, we have a system that's set for failure. Now, this system set for failure, it links with the politicians, because in essence, once the people are setting the system for failure, that means they are not setting the system for you to actually become an independent, a critical person, independent, to be able to live by yourself. When you grew up, your parents told you either you have to be independent. That means no mortgage, no help from the state, no this and that. And today, we're creating individuals who are dependent. And then once they're dependent, who are they dependent on? They're dependent on these people. So what they're doing is they're, with your own money, with our own money, they're making other people's dependents, and then therefore they become like the king, because they can allocate dependency money. So they will allocate money to the media. Okay, because they want to actually have the same narratives, and that media will serve their own purpose. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whether they have a master or whether they are responding to shareholders or to deep state or so on and so forth, in itself, our elite system has led them to protect themselves from the people by making them dependent upon them, normies, you could call them, and they become normative so that you are not an independent person. And those who are independent like yourself have to be shot in a public sense, discredited. They have to be called names: extreme right, anti-Semitism, conspiracy theorists. So the outliers who are truly independent, who are representant, I would say, of the core values of your culture, of what you would consider to be normal, in essence, have to be taken away. Now let's move to the politicians. Those politicians who are now in power, they have all the means, all the tools at their disposal in order to exercise control over you. And that control is because they've put themselves gradually over the years in that position, through the education, through the norms, through the fact that as some guy from the World Economic Forum said, you will own nothing, but you'll be happy. In essence, they tried to tell you that being independent is not a good thing for you. That's what I mean by saying they are not acting in the interest of the people, because in essence, the foundation of human being should be that being independent is good for you. It doesn't mean that you don't have to actually look after the others, help your elders, and so on and so forth. This is called a value system, and our culture are like this. In the past, your grandparents took care of their parents, the parents took care of their grandparents. Now we don't do this because you have dissociated the family. So you've dissolved a number of elements such as the family values. In Ireland, family values are very strong. In France, family values were very... I say.
Well, Ireland, they are fading with time, but currently they're still pretty solid, in fairness.
Yes. And so to finish with the politician, now when they get together, okay, we're in a nice setup here. Imagine we get together, we're a group of politicians. What do they talk about? The success of how the success they've had of exercising control over people. And of course, they are just talking about their success story. They never talk about their weakness. They never talk about this. Now, who are the shareholders of this system? Who are the ultimate puppet master? Because these individuals are taking orders like anybody else. In fact, whether you have A, B, C, or D, Bill Gates or whatever, Soros or whoever, the system itself is based on taking away rights from people, and these people, without even master, they will actually do it anyhow because they protect themselves, and therefore by protecting themselves they protect the others. So whoever is sitting on top has succeeded in putting in place a system that is not acting in the interest of the people. That's what we have to shift. And what we have to shift are things which are very simple. One is understanding that an independent person is a sane proposition. Independence, going back, and I'm not talking independence by taking the axe, the saw and hitting at anybody. I'm talking about true independence, being at peace with yourself, independent from the state, independent from your neighbors, independent from your bank, so that you can make sure you can look after your family. So independence is a core concept, because what you do is once you have independence, you have respect for yourself. You trust yourself that you've been able to actually look after your family. Then you can look outside, you can help your neighbors, and then you can actually rebuild society. So going back to the roots is sometimes really necessary. And if you ask the elite whether they actually think they are acting in our interest, they do believe they're acting in our interest. They do believe so. They believe that we are probably that they are so much acting in our interest that it's abnormal that we think they don't act in their interest.
So they do, in a sense, believe their own BS, as Jacob said. Rockefeller Foundation and Rockefellers. I dropped the word evil 2 years ago, and he just stopped me and he said, well, hold on, remember, the Rockefellers believe it's their destiny to manage these humans, that it really is their manifest destiny. They don't think of themselves as evil. They think it's right and proper that if they don't do it, these ants will make a mess of everything for themselves. It's shockingly arrogant and dystopian, but yeah, I guess they believe it. At the end of the day then, really, whether it's the kind of meta tribe of oligarchs, as Michael Yon said, or the elites, or whatever you want to call them, above von der Leyen and the Eurocrats, they all really are just highly focused on money and power and control. It's their thing. They believe they are here to rule in some fashion.
Yeah, they're basically the new kings and the new queens of this world. But you know, between belief and reality, I think you have to do a little bit of an analysis, because if you look at the picture of Macron with Ursula von der Leyen in the Élysée Palace a few days ago, where they are taking this picture where you have all the leaders in Europe united for Ukraine. Basically, these people are in a prison. They're captured. There's nobody around it. There's no crowd. Where's the crowd? So these people are already, they've sheltered themselves into their own kingdom. And when Ursula von der Leyen is in Brussels, she is sheltered. There's a glass window. You cannot actually go and touch it. So these people are not ruling a king or somebody that had a ruler. He goes in contact to the people, gets in contact. He has no fear of his people because he's going to act in the interest. They have to protect themselves because they know deep inside themselves they are not acting in our interest. They're acting in their interest. The reason why they protect themselves is we are a danger to them, in essence. We are not cattle meat. We are a real danger. We are a danger to the fact that the minute you actually engage into a conversation with them, you will put them wrong because you will ask them questions that will put them into a difficult position. So they never want to actually see you eye to eye, face to face, have a discussion, because you know and I know and they know that if we actually engage into a conversation, we will probably have the upper end. They currently have the power, but that's not forever. And Robert Kennedy, when I interviewed him back in 2002, he said, resist, 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 because once they have the power, they never want to get it back. They want to give it back. And in fact, right now is they have the power, they don't want to give it back. And they will do whatever, they will go to great lengths, any extent to actually keep this power. And the question is, how do we get the power back? How do we actually break that mold? How do we demonstrate that as individuals, they're not acting in our interest, individually and collectively? And the only way I could find is to do with my paper, to survey the French people, because everybody says, oh, well, you know, the French people, they're sheeps, they're just behaving like sheeps. And then I surveyed, did quite a few surveys, and I looked at that and I looked at the result and I said, in fact, my compatriots, they are quite intelligent, they understand everything. When you have an answer, and I'm going to give you a few numbers, 4% believe Macron is leading the country in the right direction. Only 4%. You call that support? In a kingdom of Macron, I don't call that support. So 4%. And by the way, this individual created his party called La République En Marche, which means the Republic on its way. And I ask, in which direction? Because if you're heading south, it's fine, but south may be your south, and that may be in your interest. So he never actually say to the people in which direction. That's point number one. 80% of French people believe there is too much corruption within the government. 65% believe that politicians don't act in their interest. And they've done that forever. A lot of people distrust the institutions such as the Conseil d'État, the Assemblée nationale, the Senate. They distrust them. They have more people who have disfavorable opinions of these institutions than favorable. When you take a list of the top 30 politicians, 65% of French people say that none of them incarnates a positive future. Now, I think this is being quite sound, because that's a reality. And then if you ask them, do you want Ukraine to stop the war or to the Russian? Of course I want that. And then if you ask them, do you like Trump? 75% say, no, I don't like Trump. However, if you ask them, do you actually like the effort that Trump is doing to put an end to this war? 55% say, yes, I like. So it's not a question about your opinion of the individuals, it's what it does. So in fact, they don't like the individual because the French media have portrayed him as a bad guy. However, they will praise his efforts. And I think, and this is probably the end of this discussion, because I think the most important thing is not what these politicians are saying, because they say a lot of BS, but it's what they're doing. And when you actually look at what they're doing so many things against our own interest that you have your answer. Politicians who you don't like, who you believe are acting in the interest of peace, you will praise them. You'll praise their action. And therefore we should look for politicians who put their money where their mouth is, who basically deliver on their promises, because this is rare breed.
Excellent, Xavier, and a great way to wrap it up. Absolutely. Watch what they do, not what they say. And with more awareness growing, and we're all trying to get the awareness out there, maybe a little beyond the French people, they know kind of what's wrong, but they might not know all the nuances. So the more it's more deeply understood, I think the more motivated people will be to truly oppose it. So here's to that.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Thank you to my Irish friends, and I hope you like it. And if you want to actually read Francois, you can actually do it. There's many data points on these surveys, because I don't believe in what I say. I believe in what you tell me as being the foundations to actually provide you with articles in my papers.
And that's the classic Francois, S-O-I-R, the classic.
Yes.
Actually. When I was a kid doing French in school, that was famous. So look it up and get the data, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That'll do it, guys. Hope you found it illuminating. And again, as I mentioned, Enniscorthy, Wexford, 12th of April coming this Saturday. Pretty much a full day and a 3-course lunch. And the link's down below to the Eventbrite. Hopefully you can come along. I'm guessing we're going to talk about a lot more than health, nutrition and weight loss, but there you go. And last thing, 17th, I have a weight loss masterclass, ivorcumminsworkshops.com. So April 17th, Thursday evening, I'm going to do my full 2.5 hour on all of the real core information and tools and templates you need for successful weight loss and weight management. So I go through a lot of psychology as well. I go way beyond the nutrition, hormonal stuff also. Anyway, that'll do it. Till next time, good luck, guys.